Welcome to another session of the GC MasterClass series by Contract Pod AI. I'm Charles Dimov. I'm the Vice President of Global Marketing here at Contract Pod. And also I have today with us Rajesh Sreenivasan. Rajesh, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and maybe a little bit about Rajah Tann as well?
Sure. So my name is Rajesh, and I head the Technology, Media, and Telecoms Law Practice Rajah Tann. I'm also Director and Founder of Rajah Tann Technologies, which is the legal tech arm of Rajah Tann. Just for some context, Rajah Tann has roughly about 800 fee earners across 10 different countries in Southeast Asia plus China. So it's a firm that pretty much straddles Asia. Our tagline is lawyers who know Asia. It's more than just aspirational. And so what we do is to try and use Singapore as a base, but have local offices in each of these jurisdictions. And our work, therefore, often straddles cross-border type work. It's a full service firm, so everything from every civil action to every criminal action, competition matters, corporate litigation, arbitration matters. Our firm tends to be up there with most of the major matters around.
Wow, so you're really hitting both a pretty good geographic base, so you literally are kind of covering Southeast Asia, and you're also hitting on a ton of different aspects of legal as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's great. Rajesh, let's kind of dive in here. Now, COVID has brought the whole new world, it has brought us to a whole new world, first of all. What are some of the dynamics that you're seeing specifically hitting corporate legal teams? So in terms of, tell me a little bit about what are you seeing in terms of their working environment? What are the systems they need to support them? What has changed?
Yeah, so we've just moved into this spanking new office in Marina One, which is a top tier office in Marina Bay Financial Center. So proud of it. October 2019, went in January, February, we had to basically shut it down almost permanently when Singapore went into lockdown. As sad as it was. Well, one good thing that came out of the exercise though was that we also prepared the firm for remote working. It wasn't really intended to be rolled out right away, and that turned out to be a blessing because, to your point, one of the biggest dynamic changes was the fact that lawyers are not able to work in a single environment. That lawyers cannot work easily and swiftly with their secretaries to prepare documents in a seamless manner. Physical copies of documents became almost unusable in a sense, and everything had to be at the very least PDF'd, scanned and stored electronically on cloud-based servers so that lawyers can access and get the work done remotely. That was one of the biggest operational challenges that we had to address.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. In fact, I think if anything, because I've spoken to a couple of different general counsels across North America, a few in Europe as well. And the funny thing is, they kind of resonated the same thing. They said, well, you know what, this was a little bit of that kick in the pants or a bit of a push to actually say, hey, let's get moving with the digital process. And, if anything, I kind of think that maybe the industry will be a little bit stronger coming out of this entire pandemic. Perhaps it's helped us in the long sense.
Absolutely. Even in litigation matters, the courts have been very accommodating. So all hearings were held using Zoom and other types of electronic hearing platforms. And again, all the documents had to be presented electronically across the screens. We've set up dedicated rooms in the office now, because for actual hearings, you still need the whole team down with social distancing in place, using our larger meeting rooms, but multiple screens, each one showing 2 or 3 different documents, a view of the collective room, what would otherwise have been an actual courtroom, and things like that. So we've really had to come up with a brand new workflow for litigation matters, and the same for corporate matters as well. The whole process of preparing the document, traditionally law firms would do it using Word, etc. But now we have to go another step further in terms of preparing and engrossing the documents electronically, putting in place electronic signatures, and all the rest of it. It is not new technology. It's been around for the better part of 2 decades. But we have had to supercharge and just load it all up. So the challenge isn't so much the technology, it is embedding it into our workflow. That was tough.
And getting that adoption going as well. Yeah, I totally agree. So let me shift the conversation a little bit. I think in the new era, I think a lot of attention has gone to assessing risk. It's become very strategically important in corporate. Yeah, so I mean, you've definitely seen it through your clients and such. I know that force majeure, for example, has been like this super hot topic. It's been so debated, and it just really has, I think, almost dominated the legal chatter. Now, in that light, in your view, are legal teams today in corporate settings, are they more sensitive to new systems that can help them assess business risk, or to be pragmatic? Is that the case because of COVID, or is it really, no, you know what, this has actually always been a priority, it's always been important?
Yeah, many people don't want to admit it because, they would have heard of many of these technologies in the past, but honestly, it was never a priority issue for many of the in-house counsels that we've spoken to as well. So this whole practice of what we call legal operations, and the Center for Legal Operations, for example, in the US, sets out all sorts of parameters as to how in-house counsel should adopt best practices in automating the legal process. That's been there for the better part of 10, 12 years, and more mature certainly in the last 3 to 5 years. But again, it's been piecemeal, at least anecdotally based on what my clients' feedback has been. And so that's why law firms ourselves are looking at adopting technology and helping to some extent our clients get used to this sort of technology. So there have been situations where, for example, when we rolled out the electronic documents through automation processes and introduced e-signing, the clients were so impressed by it, they then asked us to create specific solutions for them and to transfer all their board documents, for example, into electronic format and to embed e-signatures for all of them. And that's when we found that, the skill sets of the lawyers really had to jump up a few notches. Because you can't get the IT guy to do something like this. It has to be done by a lawyer who understands where the signature field ought to be, and just make sure that all the wordings are just right. And so we've had to then train our lawyers to be very adept with this process of dealing with contracts electronically, signing contracts electronically. There's a whole different world out there now because you're sending these documents out by email. There's a need for you to track the documents, making sure that the right person signs the document, all of which does add a little bit of risk, I must say, if you're not careful with how you embed it into the workflow. And that's the biggest risk. I think people look at this as a technology risk issue. I see it as a process risk issue that law firms and in-house counsel need to deal with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I like your perspective on that as well, which is it really does take lawyers or somebody with a legal background to be able to kind of set these systems up right. And it's funny because, I mean, the new generation now has something called a legal engineer. I mean, we use a lot of legal engineers inside ourselves. And so again, fascinating new kind of dimensions and places where we're going with this. But yeah, really, really good point. And also, I love the perspective also that you mentioned about saying, if you're a corporate, if you're in corporate legal, then it's a smart move to say, talk to your, somebody like Rajah Tann, your law firm, to say, well, how can you guys kind of help us with this as well? Kind of making that transition, bringing on those new systems and the new processes, and what are some of the best practices? So nice. Let me take you in a not exactly a different direction, but I wanted to ask you about what's the feeling amongst the corporate legal space in Southeast the Asia area about digital transformation. So again, it's pretty related with the previous question that I had. In North America, in Europe, very hot topic. And again, I mean, I want to get that sense from Asia as well. Is digital transformation in the legal space specifically, is it a hot topic? We hear about it all over the place, right? In all different industries, in retail, and frankly, in just about everything. And now it really seems to be kind of taking hold in the legal space as well. Is that the feeling that you're getting in Asia, Asian corporate community also?
It very much is so. I mean, the dynamic has to be understood. For in-house counsel, they are viewed as a cost center within a company. They're not, although it's very unfair perception, but they're seen as a cost center. And therefore they've got budgets, etc. And in the early days, you can't easily justify bringing in an IT system because the question will be, what's wrong with the existing system? But now with the new work environment that is in place, in-house counsels find it a lot easier to justify transformation simply because the workflow demands that the document be created electronically. It demands that we need to have remote working facilities. It demands that we must have automation and e-signing embedded. Otherwise, we can't get the job done for the stakeholders. So in that sense, from my discussions, lunches with many in-house counsels, they found it actually easier because of the imperatives available today for them to ask for this additional budget, sometimes on an ad hoc basis from the management, and say that without this, your legal team is going to be paralyzed. And then action happens. Having said all of that, it is hard times for all companies as well. And so the legal counsels have to spend a bit of time not asking for the Rolls Royce, as it were, but asking for something practical, or even look at a pragmatic or even a tiered approach to using technology. And the other solution, as I mentioned earlier, is to reach out to the law firms or other stakeholders that they work with, ask them whether they have the capability for these things to be done, at least to tide things over. And what happens then is that their own people get used to these technologies, and when the time is right, they can then put up the request, get the budget, and have their own versions of these electronic platforms. So we're seeing a combination of these factors.
That's pretty interesting. And again, I honestly, if you're in a legal team in a corporation, again, I completely understand that sentiment of thinking that, hey, you know what, my job is really to focus on the law, to reduce risk in my company, etc. I'm not the IT guys, and I don't want to be the IT guy, right? So, so you're right. I mean, the best thing is work with a partner to try to help that happen. Interesting. Now, in terms of actually, still staying focused on that exact topic about getting a system up and running. Again, in corporations, there's always that sense that when you've got a big project, I mean, and these are fairly big projects, even if you try to keep it contained, I mean, hey, it's a substantial thing to go. Digital transformation, isn't an overnight thing. It takes a bit of planning and project management and stuff. Now, getting a system up and running, again, sometimes it can be lengthy, sometimes it can be a bit of a tedious project, but the important part in a lot of corporations is really kind of faster time to value. Being able to get a system like, hey, I'm going to pick on us, a CLM system, a contract lifecycle management system, getting it up and running as fast as possible, even if it's like piecemeal, at least getting that first piece up so that people can use it and get the momentum going. Now, again, I've spoken to a lot of folks in the North American and European market. And again, I'd like to hear your impression on the Asian market as well. Is that the same sense that you're seeing there?
It is. And I think the biggest reason why now people are more receptive to many of these legal tech solutions is they are presented on the SaaS model, software as a service model, which means that the time required for installation, testing, all that is no longer there. The focus will be on training people to know how to use the platform. And then once the training is there, your license kicks in and you're good to go. So that sort of an arrangement is great for the legal firm, the legal practice and the legal teams, because they focus on just the workflow integration aspect, not the IT integration aspects. And so they can make a decision on their own without having to then consult with IT and say, look guys, is this going to be an issue? Of course, there'll be a security check and things like that. But most major, SaaS players would be using trusted places, vendors like your Amazons, Microsofts, and other repositories, which have the necessary security clearance to begin with. And so with that assurance, the adoption rates are definitely increasing today.
Okay. Now, let's shift focus over to advanced technology. So talk to me a little bit about AI technology. So artificial intelligence. It's been the buzzword, of course. It's everywhere. Everyone's throwing it around. It's both. We often see it as a panacea for many things, but also it creates a lot of fear in the market. And from speaking to a lot of lawyers, but not just the lawyers, but some of the legal folks, some of the paralegals, etc., the legal operations folks, some of the contract managers, there's often a little bit of a mix of that fear. Geez, is this AI going to, if I bring one in, is it going to take away my job, for example? So now, of course, I think, Rajesh, probably you and I see it a little bit differently. I certainly see AI more as an enabler. I see it as an automation mechanism that helps take away some of the repeatable tasks, some of the mundane things, some of the easier projects, right? Which might be like, gosh, it's easy, but if I have 40,000 contracts, suddenly it's not quite that easy. But again, taking away that mundane, so I can really focus on more strategic elements. Now, what do you feel? I mean, is AI and legal automation, like in the CLM, is the market getting there? Is there that acceptance? Are we seeing some of those benefits and saying, hey, yeah, this really does make sense? Or maybe it doesn't?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. People are realizing, firstly, that it's not an existential narrative anymore. It's not a situation where we have anything close to general artificial intelligence. Machine learning means someone has to teach the machine. And so the only downside that people are seeing right now is like, gosh, there's no button to press. I have to teach this thing before it can give me what I want. And so that's what people therefore want to try and avoid as far as possible. So I think if you look at the more mature platforms, let's say, the CLM platforms today, the engines are not raw engines. The engines have been pre-trained to recognize clauses. It's pre-trained to recognize anomalies within documents. And that is the clincher. That's the clincher, because then you are moving away from the need to train and really seeing time and cost savings, because you're now removing that possibility of a lawyer missing out on a clause, for example, or misconstruing a clause, and having the benefit of an engine that's been trained, let's say, by contract experts in the context of CLM, or anomaly testing in the context of, let's say, due diligence work, where you see other platforms like, let's say, Luminance and a few of the other players, Kira, etc., in play with AI. That sort of scenario is quite different. If you're dealing with a Luminance, Kira type situation, there's a lot of training required. And I think people are starting to feel a little bit tired, because it's taking a while. It's not happening. Pre-trained engines, which you see in a pre-installed model like a CLM, and for a constrained purpose, for contract review, for example, that makes sense, because it's not so open-ended that that sense of frustration comes in over time. We have both in Rajah and Tann. So we have constrained AI models, which are very fact-specific, project-specific. They do a good job. You just need to train it for that one purpose. And then you have the open-ended AI models. That's causing a little bit of frustration in the market right now. So I think it's a win. Can't say good or bad. I think both are different trajectories of development.
Yeah, and I was about to say, I do agree with you very much. I have heard of a couple of clients where they bought into a system, they thought that was great, it had AI technology, only to discover afterwards that, well, you know what, the provider wasn't really going to do the work for them. It was really saying, well, here, this is cool, and then their own devices. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so absolutely. So it is good to, again, really talking up the partnership model, very important to, working with a provider like Rajah Tann or whatever the provider is. I think maybe the lesson out of that, Rajesh, might be to say, if you're in the market looking for these type of systems, make sure that you're asking the right questions of your provider, whether it's the law firm itself who's helping you through this process, or whether it's the system provider to say, okay, who's actually going to do this training? Who's going, is it so that I can use it right away or not?
Yeah. The market is much more mature now, so you can't, get away with saying I've got AI and this is the big flash, and everybody is like wowed. Now that people are a lot more cautious, they say, so what exactly does the AI do? So that's the sign that we need to be very specific.
Yeah, you're right, and exactly. And was the AI actually did you guys mean to do this, or is it just a bolt-on, or was it just your summer students who created this thing?
Absolutely.
So, good. Now, hopefully we're getting to the final phases of the pandemic, and I realize that as we're doing this recording, we're still in the midst of one of the waves. The vaccine hasn't quite come out just yet, although we all have our fingers crossed that that's on its way as well. But in any case, again, we've been in this really tough time, and we're making our way through it, and that's a good thing. Now, smart companies, smart corporations, their legal teams are thinking about how do you, frankly, for lack of a better word, how do you take advantage of this crisis to emerge out of it a little bit stronger. Now, in that light, in that respect, and given that you deal with a lot of clients with Rajah Tann, and you would have quite the breadth of experience in seeing where are people's thoughts at with the different corporations, what advice might you have to a corporate GC about exactly what should they be thinking to emerge out of this with a stronger legal?
Yeah, that's great question. In my mind, I think the biggest thing that should be running through their minds at this point is not going back to where we were before. But with everything that's been learned to date and all the new workflows that we put in place, how do we now make this work in a post-pandemic world, right? So now you have the option potentially of going back to the office, but then you look and say, well, hang on, this has worked out actually fairly well. Certain roles, for example, can be done remotely and will save us significant costs if they were that way, plus probably greater satisfaction on the part of the lawyers or the support staff. And I think that is going to be the biggest takeaway from all this. And when anyone that's doing post-pandemic planning, which we slowly should start doing, must take into account that we're moving towards a new working paradigm altogether. The learnings from this experience are so important for us to take away as the opportunity to now create a new normal. Things like using digital documents, electronic signatures, basic things like that should not disappear once the pandemic goes away. It should be the new normal. It should be the way forward for us. And then it frees everyone else from having to, cut down another tree, printing goes down. Whatever you say about paperless office, I come from a law firm that believes very strongly in that. And we are very frank, we say it's not paperless, it's paperless. So there's less paper, but it's not paperless by any means. But now we have had no choice but to make it paperless simply because there's no way to convey the physical documents from point A to point B. It has to be electronic. So biggest lesson, learn from these, create new workflows where you now embed these things in a permanent state in a post-pandemic world. That would be the best way forward. Otherwise, all these learnings would have been for naught, in a sense, or kept away for the next pandemic, and then we'll bring it out again. No, we may not have that luxury the next time this comes around. We need to basically move towards this thing and continue this way to some extent, which means some people may never need to go back to the office. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but that may be the new normal. So be prepared for that.
Yeah, the new normal. That's an exciting topic. And it's funny. I think I was listening to a program where there was I can't remember the name of the Harvard professor, but one of the Harvard profs was basically kind of just commenting on the pandemic situation and such, and the impact on business. And their comment was saying, well, a lot of companies are digitizing many more of their processes. And they made this really funny observation. They said, when you go from an analog process to a digital process, it's not like we expect at all that anybody at the end of the crisis is going to say, okay, good enough, let's go back to the old analog ways. So it's a one way ticket. Once you learn that it's a much better process, then why would you ever go back?
You may not want to, but it's still, let's be clear that some people may still, it's like an old habit, it just doesn't die. Right? When you're back in your office again, you can reach your bookshelves and all your documents, your printer's just outside your room. You've got to stop that thing. So which means that when you go back to the office, guess what? The printer's not there anymore outside your room. There's no need for it. Right? And then that sort of weans you back out of the old habits, and this is truly a new normal. So that kind of higher order thinking is necessary to remove the old workflow completely where it makes sense to do.
That's an interesting new world we're stepping into. So, Rajesh, let's end off on a strong positive here. So, what is your thoughts on the greatest opportunity that's kind of facing businesses and legal teams in the next year? What will bring? What is the next year going to bring for the in-house counsel teams? What's your prediction? What do you think?
What's going to come out of this, I hope, in a very positive sense, is brand new ways of collaboration, a mix of physical and electronic means of collaborating, much closer working environments. One thing that has happened because of COVID, for example, is I know exactly what every one of my lawyers' families are like, because they keep running around behind them when you're doing the video clips and all that. And that sort of affinity where we are recognizing all of our people, as humans, as family units. We mustn't let that go. And I think using that and taking that and a situation where basically work life and personal life is kind of melding together has its downsides, but let's focus on the upsides, because I think on the upside, it means that we see each other for who we actually are. And that's a very, very powerful thing when you take it from a human resource standpoint, from the perspective of getting the best out of your people, being able to relate to them in the context, not just in their role in the office, but in their role as part of society, as part of a family unit, is so, so powerful. I would love to see how this new dynamic is going to shape us as better leaders, as better organizations moving forward.
That is an absolute fascinating perspective, Rajesh, that this arising out of this crisis, we are actually seeing more of the humanity of our own teams, of our own businesses, of our own legal purpose. So that's fascinating perspective, and thank you for that view. In fact, I don't think I've heard anybody else end off that way. So thank you very much. That was really, really, really important, and I definitely hope that that's one of the things that we ingrain in our society, and we do kind of keep and hold on to it and really kind of push forward. So good view for the future. With that, Rajesh, thank you so much for your time. I realize that we are in completely different time zones, and it is rather late for you, and it's early for me. But again, thank you so much for your time. And again, this was another session of the GC Masterclass series by Contract Pod AI.